Hey everyone, hope you're having a good one. Today I'm bringing you part 3 of my detailed hero overviews where I'll be covering Howitzer, its strengths and weaknesses, some good builds to use with it, as well as some good strategies. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks to everyone that's been supporting my channel. You guys and gals have been awesome and continue to help me bring better content to this game, and I do seriously appreciate it. I have gotten a few requests for certain heroes in the past few days, so just know that your requests are being heard, and I'm thinking I'll do a hero overview every other video, so I'm not just a character review channel. But again, thanks for letting me know what y'all have been enjoying, and your feedback is being considered for future videos, but now let's hop right into it. Admittedly, I haven't played a lot of quote-unquote traditional mid laners in a little while, mostly due to them just not being my preferred playstyle, but after I got a request to do Howie as the next hero overview and picked them back up, oh boy did that change. Howitzer is a long-range, high magical damage dealing hero who strives off disrupting your enemy's positioning as well as poking them from a distance with his R2000 missile, and overall brings a ton of utility to fights with his kit. So if you like playing Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy after he fell into a severe crack addiction, then you came to the right place. And by the end of this video, you'll know everything you need to play it effectively. As always with the hero overviews, we're going to start by hopping into practice mode and show off his abilities in detail and how best to use them. So starting off with his passive ability, we have Armed Salvo, which will periodically enhance Howitzer's next basic attack to deal extra damage in a slightly bigger than normal AoE. Nice. It will also restore 10% of the total damage dealt, including the AoE, but it can be increased up to 50% by landing it on an enemy hero, and this helps quite a bit with sustain in the early game. And finally, the last part of his passive will reduce Armed Salvo's cooldown by 5 seconds for each ability Howie casts, further helping increase his sustained potential. Moving on to his primary ability, the R2000 missile. Upon tapping Q on PC or left bumper on console, Howie will launch his R2000 missile in the direction you're currently aiming. Some important things to note with this ability: by default, the ability is set to instant cast, meaning just tapping the button will instantly launch the missile where you're aiming. You can hold the button down, however, for about 2 seconds before it will automatically fire. This way, you can track the target a little bit more if necessary, instead of instantly firing it. Another important thing to note is the missile
knows where it is at all times. It knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, or where it isn't from where it is, whichever is greater, it obtains a difference or deviation. The guidance subsystem uses deviations to...
Another important thing to note is the missile will most likely take a little bit of time to get used to. It has deceptively long range if you aim it correctly, and is easily his highest damaging ability, so you'll be using it a lot to poke. It also does have some travel time, so the farther away you are from your opponent, it becomes a little bit more tricky to aim. Again, this will just come with some time and experience though. Next up, we have Howie's secondary ability, Landmine. Upon tapping E on PC or left trigger on console, Howie will throw a landmine from his power armor in a lobbing arc style depending where you're aiming. Once the landmine hits the ground, it becomes active, allowing Howie to recast the ability and have it explode, knocking back enemy heroes or yourself specifically depending on where they are in the mine's AoE. If you don't end up recasting the ability within 2.5 seconds though, the mine will explode on its own. Some important notes with this ability are the mine will not explode by recasting it in midair, so if you recast the ability while the mine is still up there, it will immediately detonate on touching the ground, so don't spam recast unless you want it to explode ASAP. Another tip for the mine is you can also use it to boost yourself back over the river fog wall dropdown if you're in a pinch. This can help you secure the river buffs more safely, especially in the early game, but still make sure you're keeping it warded as well. Then moving on to Howie's alternate ability, Slow Grenades. This is another instant cast ability that will come out similar to his mine in an arcing, loud projectile that upon landing will split open into several small cluster grenades and float above the ground for around 5 to 8 seconds. Upon an enemy minion or hero walking within proximity to the grenades, they will automatically explode, dealing an initial burst of damage, but then lessening with each consecutive grenade on the same target. The grenades will also, as the name implies, apply a quite significant slow to the target for 1 second. refreshing with each grenade hit. There's not anything super crazy about this ability. Its biggest utility is the slow, so typically the best way to use them is to lob it at an opponent who might be getting away, as they have pretty decent max range. Or you can also slap them on some certain choke points like stairways as you're running away from people to help create some space between you. Last up, we have Howie's ultimate ability, Make It Rain. Upon pressing R on PC or right bumper and left bumper on console, Howie will Oh wait, no, that was before his rework, my bad. Howitzer will thrust himself up into the sky, retaining the ability to move around freely and unleash the barrage of homing missiles wherever he's aiming for 3 seconds. This ability, on top of just dealing a ton of damage, also brings a lot of utility to fights, allowing Howitzer to extend his staying power significantly when used in combination with his other abilities. Usually you'll want to save your ultimate as your finishing ability, both because it's likely you'll have just used most, if not all your other abilities, and Howie's biggest downfall in my opinion is he suffers from pretty long cooldown timers. So typically, my approach in the early game is to whittle an enemy down by poking them with the R2000 missile until they're a little less than half health. Then I'll use the landmine to push the enemy closer to me.
Hi, how are you?
This will also make it easier to land your R2000 because you'll know where they're gonna land. Then you can finish it off by throwing your slow grenades on top of them. If this isn't enough to kill them or get them low enough to finish off with an auto or two, you can pop your ultimate to finish them off. Two important notes about the ultimate are that if you anticipate the enemy hero using their blink to try and escape, if you immediately start moving in the direction you think they're gonna blink upon ulting, they won't have enough range even by blinking to escape, sealing their inevitable fate. Another one is, you can extend the time you're up in the air after using your ultimate by pressing and holding your R2000 missile. This will give you around another 2 seconds of time in the air. And if you're in a really bad spot, you can also stack the stasis crest item on top of all of them, giving you enough time to grab a quick snack before falling back down into the entire enemy team's eager hands. Lastly, for the ability section, is the order I would typically upgrade his kit in. The first is definitely going to be the R2000 because it deals the most damage by far, and you'll be using it the most to poke your opponent. Then I would recommend the slow grenades second, as they can also be pretty potent, and the slow increases with each level along with the damage. And finally, I would upgrade the landmine third because you're mostly just going to be using it for utility purposes. As a quick side note, these are obviously in between upgrading your ultimate whenever possible, just to be clear. Howie's biggest downfall as a mid laner comes from his general lack of mobility without using his kit to give him certain boosts. But with his cooldown timers being exceptionally long for these abilities, it's, in my opinion, the most important mechanic to play around as a Howie. This means knowing when a good time to use these abilities would be, and when it's better to just keep them in your back pocket. When I say this, I mostly mean his landmine and his ultimate. Obviously, don't shy away from using them if you think you can get a kill or deal some serious damage, but don't just willy-nilly throw your mine around expecting it to deal any damage. Howie relies on his heavy burst potential and is most effective when combining his entire kit together, but again, his lack of mobility makes using these abilities a high trade-off. You can lower the cooldowns pretty significantly by changing up his build a little bit, but personally I think a full magic damage build with a teensy bit of attack speed using Prophecy, but only if you don't need anti-heal, which is pretty rare. Speaking of Howie's builds, this video is coming out the day after 0.18 and the item rework, so his average build does look a little bit different now. I played a few games and tried a few builds, but the most impactful feeling one has been along the lines of this. I'll start out with Combustion since it still retained the same effects after the rework. It gives a very noticeable boost to your early game mana sustain and has great overall stats. Picking this up first will grant you a noticeable power spike in the early game by making his R2000 much more potent. After that, I've been building into one of the new mage items this patch in Soulbinder. This will grant even more potency to your R2000 by dealing extra damage at 1500 units or more. To give you an idea of how far 1500 units is, your ranged basic attack is 1300 units. So there's purposefully a little bit of guesswork involved, but this item seems like it's going to make a lot of mages a lot more annoying. After that, I start building into Wraith leggings to give me some extra maneuverability, which is very helpful in almost any situation since you're basically a sitting duck for at least 10 seconds after using your kit. Pretty self-explanatory item, but again, very useful on Howie, and if you're someone like me who has consistently terrible positioning, it's certainly viable to grab it as your second pickup instead. After that, I build into another new mage item, Noxia? Something like that? This will make Howie's built-in burst potential even more potent by having its own separate burst damage upon landing 2 different abilities. At this point, most people will have built up some additional magic armor, so I'll build into Caustica, which just deals bonus armor penetration damage in a nutshell. Finally, I'll top it off with Oblivion Crown to give me one final huge power spike in the in-game. So overall, Howitzer is a great hero that brings a lot of utility to both yourself and to team fights. Make him a very solid pick in almost any team composition. That being said though, he definitely has one of the higher skill ceilings, so again, this requires lots of practice and pre-planning of your moves so you can stay alive longer and make more of an impact in team fights. Usually this means saving your high utility items like the landmine and the slow grenades for the most opportune time you feel like, such as to knock an enemy back into your team who's trying to escape, or by throwing it down in front of your carry who's got a chimera stuck to him like hot tar. Similar situations are in play for the slow mines too. Place them strategically at choke points or lob them in front of heroes to try and run away or reposition. So that will bring us to the end of this hero overview. This one was more of a special request for a viewer, so by all means, if you enjoy a certain hero and you'd like me to cover them next, let me know. I'm keeping track of the feedback, and since these hero overviews have done so well, again, I'll probably be posting one every other video until we're all caught up. If that's too much and you'd like me to cover other topics though, definitely just let me know. Thanks for watching, y'all are the real ones that stuck around till the end, but I appreciate the support from everyone, and I'll see you on the battlefield.